This is the crime scene of Cielo Drive. The blood you are watching at is true, and later I'm going to show you the horrifying, original, shocking videos and photos of the crime scene and the corpses of all the victims brutally slaughtered, included Sharon Tate. All the videos and photos in clear, uncensored. So if you want to watch this shocking and really disturbing documentary, I must warn you, because many images could disturb the sensitivity of the viewers. As you watch the entering of the house at Cielo Drive, you can see the blood and the writing pig, written by Susan Atkins with the blood of Sharon Tate. Susan Atkins dissembled Sharon Tate and ripped her baby out of the womb. So, this is real crime.
Sharon Polanski, Jay Sebring, Abigail Folger, Wojtek Rykowski, and another man who is unknown.
This was the guy who was 18 years old, and this was Cielo Drive property.
Challenge the jurors, or are you ready to accept anyone that's put into the box?
Well, you've already tried the case.
Just a minute. Please. The court has made certain orders concerning publicity, and we are going to make a request of the court this morning so that we can have questions in an orderly manner if the court agrees to do it. Charlie, can we get a picture of you back here? You looking for Charlie? Hey, Charlie? Can you look back here for us, please? How they've been treating you, Charlie?
What do you need, Charlie?
Susan Atkins.
You have eyes? Open them. Anything you'd like to say?
Charlie? What were you thinking of when you saw Linda Kasabian yesterday?
I was thinking of how pretty she looked.
Are you upset with Linda?
No, not at all.
Do you think she will testify for the prosecution?
That's up to Linda.
Oh, yeah. Do you care?
Care?
Yeah, whether she does or not?
That's up to her. She hasn't got anything to do with me.
But don't you have any feelings about it?
Feelings? All my feelings are good.
Charlie, this is a chance.
The sun was out this morning. You notice it?
Mm-hmm.
So, Charles Manson always stated for all his life until his death that he was innocent about Cielo Drive massacre. He never ordered the massacre and to kill Sharon Tate. He repeated this until his end in 2017. Instead, look at Susan Atkins, the way she walked. She was like a star on the red carpet of Hollywood. Look at her.
Gentlemen, the judge is going to take the bench, so would you please leave? If you do, maybe this thing will continue in the future. Thank you. Okay, that's it. Thank you for your cooperation.
And now, Susan Atkins, the fiercest killer of Cielo Drive, the monster who slaughtered Sharon Tate. She ripped her fetus out of her womb. She licked Susan Sharon Tate's blood and she wrote on the door of the house, "Pig." Now she's acting as she's walking on the red carpet of Hollywood. Instead, she was exiting by the trial that had to decide if sending her to the death penalty. Look at her.
Susan, would you answer a couple of questions for us? What did you think of this morning's proceedings, Susan?
I didn't think anything about it.
What about Lindsay? Do you want Susan?
I think she's awful pretty.
Do you want a press conference too?
I don't fear for anybody's testimony.
Think Charles should have a news conference?
I don't
Would you
know.
like to have a news conference, Susan?
Sure.
What would you tell us?
Hey, Jackie, what you want to hear?
Let me see if I can.
Dear followers, friends, viewers, before passing to show you, I'm not kidding, because police released a few time ago the horrifying, original, disturbing, shocking videos and photos of the crime scene at Cielo Drive and all the photos of the victims horribly slaughtered, included Sharon Tate, in Claire, and Uncensored. So if you want to watch this documentary, be really prepared, because many images could disturb the sensitivity of the viewers, because this documentary is really tough and crude. And now I start talking about how the Cielo Drive massacre happened in all the horrifying and creepy details that many people and journalists haven't told you, as I'm going to tell you this in all the most brutal details. Charles Manson wasn't at Cielo Drive Massacre, so he was accused to be the mastermind, to have ordered to 4 members of the Manson family to slaughter Sharon Tate and all the people who were with her. In that case, there were friends. But Charles Manson always denied with force this thing. He always stated to be innocent. He stated that he never ordered the Cielo Drive massacre or to kill Sharon Tate. He swore it until the last breath of his life. He died on November the 19th in 2017. So, in the crime scene, there were 4 members of the family. There were Tex Watson, also called Charles Tex Watson, who was 23. Susan Atkins, who was 21. Patricia Krenwinkel, called Katie, who was 21 years. And Linda Kasabian, who stood as guard at the gate of Cielo Drive's property to advise if there were some people coming. Then I can tell you that Linda Kasabian at some point tried to stop the massacre. She didn't succeed in it, but she really tried. So, Roman Polanski, because Sharon Tate was the wife of Roman Polanski, and Sharon Tate was 8 months and a half pregnant. And Roman Polanski, the famous director, the night of the massacre wasn't in Los Angeles at Cielo Drive because he was in London because of a job. So, Charles Manson spent all his life in jail, but he always, as I told you before, denied to have ordered the Cielo Drive massacre and to kill Sharon Tate because he stated that she was a very lovely girl and also in another statement a wonderful creature. So the main hypothesis was that Charles Manson ordered the 4 members of the family to go at Cielo Drive to murder Terry Melcher, who was a producer and who refused to produce his album, and so for revenge he wanted Terry Melcher to be assassinated. But there are some obscure points about these hypotheses, and I explain you the reason why. Terry Melcher had been just in that huge house at Cielo Drive in rent, but he left on January 1969 because he moved in another house. So he wasn't living there in rent for several months. And they also, some hypotheses that Charles Manson wanted also the musician Mark Lindsay dead. But all these people didn't live in that huge house anymore. And, in fact, Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate took in rent that huge house at 10050 Cielo Drive on February the 2nd, 1969. So, Roman Polanski and his wife Sharon Tate lived there in rent. And Charles Manson knew this information, no doubts, because on February the 15th, 1969, Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate went just to live in that property at Cielo Drive. And on March the 23rd, 1969, Charles Manson visited that huge house and the property at Cielo Drive to have a clarification, or somebody say to revenge, about Terry Melcher and maybe kill him because he refused to produce his album. But that day, the owner of the huge house and the property, Altobelli, was in the property. and he told Charles Manson that Terry Melcher didn't live there in rent anymore because he moved in another house, and instead at that time Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate lived in that property. So Charles Manson knew this information 1000%. So the only thing for sure is that since that Charles Manson told the 4 members of the family to do a massacre in a witchy way. So, and also ordered the female members, and I'm talking about Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian, to follow all the instruction by Tex Watson and to do all the orders Tex Watson would have told them to do. So the leader was Tex Watson. So at this party at Sharon Tate house, there was, of course, Sharon Tate, 8 months and a half pregnant. Her closest friend and ex-boyfriend, Jay Sebring, was 35, and he was the most famous hairdresser of all the male celebrities of Hollywood, and also the most expensive one. Then there was Frykowski, who was 32, a friend of Sharon Tate, with his girlfriend Abigail Folger, who was 25, and she was the daughter of Peter Folger, owner of Coffee Folger's Industry. The four of the family arrived at about midnight at the entering of the property. Tex Watson climbed on the pool of the phone near the entering gate, and he cut the phone line. Then the 4 ones took their car back on the slopes of the hill leading to the huge house at Cielo Drive. They parked, and then they came back on feet. Fearing that the gate could have the alarm system, they climbed up on embankment on the right of the gate, and from there they entered the garden. In that moment, a car came into their direction. Tex Watson ordered the women to hide among the bushes and shout the car driver to stop. It was the younger guy of this slaughter, except the fetus of Sharon Tate, because that guy, they didn't know in that video I just made you watch, was Stephen Earl Parent. He was only 18 years old. He was a student, and he maintained himself economically, working at Jonas Miller Stereo, and he went from door to door to sell some objects. On that case, he arrived at 11:45 p.m. to sell to the caretaker of Cielo Drive property, William Garretson, who lived in the home guest house, an alarm clock radio. Watson pointed a caliber 22 revolver. So the young boy begged him not to hurt him, swearing he wouldn't told anything to anybody. But Watson threw himself against the parent with a knife. He hurted him at the palm of his hand. He cut his tendons and he tore the strap of his clock on his wrist off. And then this clock was found by the police in the crime scene, and the clock was stopped at midnight and 15. So the first victim was already on August the 9th, 1969. Then Watson shot at this young guy 4 times with cold blood at chest, abdomen and at face, killing him. Then Watson ordered the women to help him to push the car more forward in the way. After having crossed the garden before the house, Tex ordered Linda Kasabian to look for an open window. Then Tex cut a mosquito net. Tex Watson ordered Linda Kasabian to overwatch, to remain at the gate of the property to overwatch if somebody could arrive. So Linda Kasabian was stood as guard at Cielo Drive property's gate. So Tex Watson removed the mosquito net, entered the open window, and then he made Susan Atkins and Patricia Krenwinkel enter from the main door. Frykowski was sleeping on the sofa of the living room and suddenly woke up. Watson kicked him at his head. Frykowski asked Watson who he was and what he was doing there. And Tex Watson replied, "I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's business, the devil's work." Then the three ones, Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, and Patricia Krenwinkel, found the other inhabitants of the property, and they forced them to go in the living room. Watson tied together Sharon Tate and Jade Sebring to the neck with a rope he brought with himself, and that he put on the ceiling beam of the living room. Jade Sebring tried to rebel, and Watson shot at him. Abigail Folger was taken in her bedroom where she kept her bag, and she gave $70 to I think, Patricia Krenwinkel. Watson, realizing that Jay Sebring was still alive, stabbed at him other 7 times, killing him. Then Frykowski, the hands of Frykowski were tied with a towel, so Frykowski succeeded in liberating himself, and immediately Susan Atkins threw herself on him, and they started to fight. And Susan Atkins stabbed Frykowski at the legs, but Frykowski kept on fighting, arriving out of the main door. Watson reached Frykowski on the porch, and he hit him at his head several times with his gun. Then he stabbed with a not human fury many times, and then he shot at Frykowski twice. Linda Kasabian, who stood as a guard at the gate of the property, hearing those horrifying and creepy screams, rushed to the main door, and when she saw the horror that was happening, she repented, and she tried to stop the massacre, inventing an excuse. She lied to Susan Atkins, saying that there was somebody who was arriving. But her attempt failed. Into the house, Abigail Folger succeeded in escaping from Patricia Krenwinkel when she was chased by Patricia until the garden. Then Patricia stabbed at Abigail Folger. More times, the two women kept on fighting on the ground when Tex Watson arrived and stabbed Abigail Folger 28 times. So when the police arrived in the morning in the crime scene, they stated they didn't know that Abigail Folger, and then I will show you the real corpse of Abigail Folger in Clare, so you can see her too. She was wearing a nightgown, but I don't know if this nightgown was light blue white, but she received so many brutal and ferox stabs that she looked like wearing a red dress, and that red was all the blood. due to all these countless fierce stabs. So, Frykowski, incredibly, because this is incredible, Frykowski was still alive. Oh my God! And he was crawling in the garden when Watson saw him again, so stunned to see him still alive, and he killed him with so many brutal, fierce stabs, so that Frykowski was stabbed 51 times. Meanwhile, into the house, Sharon Tate was begging Susan Atkins not to kill her until she gave birth to his son. Only 2 weeks missing. She was pregnant of 8 months and a half, and she offered herself as hostage to save her baby she had in her womb. Susan Atkins screamed to her, "Look, bitch, I don't care about you. I don't care about your baby. You are going to die, and I don't feel a thing about it." Then both Susan Atkins and Tex Watson started to stab her fiercely until Susan Atkins disemboweled her and ripped her baby out of her womb. Then Susan Atkins licked the blood of Sharon Tate, and with the same Sharon Tate's blood wrote on the entering door, as I made you see before, the word pig. And from the autopsy, it has been discovered that Sharon Tate had been stabbed 16 times, and once she was stabbed at her heart. So, the four of the Manson family, I must stress that from midnight and half and 4 a.m., hot witnesses who lived in the neighborhood of Cielo Drive admitted to have heard screams and also some kinds of gunshots, but they didn't call the police. Then the four ones, when they finished the massacre, they left the property. They took their bloody dresses off. They changed their dresses and they threw their bloody dresses and the weapons down the hills. And so, at only 9:14 a.m., the police was called. The Unit 8L62 with the policeman Jerry Joe De Rosa and 8L5 policeman Wisen Ant of Los Angeles Police Department received an emergency call. Code 2, possible homicide at 10050 Cielo Drive, and then immediately went to the place. And then arrived also the agent Bar Bridge. Think about that the first suspect of the massacre was the caretaker William Garretson, but then the suspects failed, disappeared. He wasn't guilty. So, when the police discovered the horrifying massacre, they immediately called Roman Polanski, and Roman Polanski immediately came back from London. And on August the 13th, there were the funeral of Abigail Folger, buried at the Holy Cross Cemetery of Colma, California. Stephen Parent, 18, was buried at Queen of Heaven Cemetery of Roland A. Lights, California. Jay Sebring was buried at the Holy Sepulchre Cemetery of Southfield in Michigan. And Sharon Tate and, fortunately, her baby recognized a born baby from the Catholic Church, and thanks to the Pope was recognized and baptized as a born child. And Sharon Tate was buried with her baby, whose name was Paul Richard Polanski, on August the 13th at the Holy Cross Cemetery of Culver City, California, and the baby was put in the arms of Sharon Tate. So, on October 1969, many members of the Manson family had been arrested, also for other crimes, for other slaughters, for example, robberies and other crimes at the Spawn Ranch in the Death Valley. And also the same Charles Manson was arrested on October the 13th, 1969. And he also repeated, "I wasn't at the massacre of Cielo Drive, I'm innocent." And he always denied to order that massacre, but also to have been the mastermind of that massacre. In 1971, Charles Manson was condemned to death, but in 1972, the death penalty was abolished in California and was turned into life in prison. And this was the same for Susan Atkins, Tex Watson, and Patricia Krenwinkel. They were all condemned to death, but the death penalty was abolished in California in 1972, and so they were condemned to life in prison. It's a weird fact because a few years later, I'm talking about in 1978, the death penalty came back in California. In fact, we are in 2024, on August 2024, and in California there is also the condemned to death. So it was that period. So Susan Atkinson, the same. Susan Atkins converted herself to Christian religion, and I can tell you that I don't feel any pity about her horrifying death in prison. Because you must know that Susan Atkins had been condemned to death penalty, then turned into life in prison. But in 2008, she was diagnosed a brain cancer that caused her the amputation of a leg. So then the cancer came back even more ferocious. So she was at the end stage cancer, and there were also many petitions to set Susan Atkins free for 2-3 months of her dying life. But the court, the judge, rejected the petition because of this. Before dying, Sharon Tate begged, "Mercy, mercy for me and my baby." And Susan Atkins answered to her, "No mercy for you and your baby." And so this was answered to her in 2009 when she was suffering as a dying dog in jail. No mercy for you. This was the answer. And so she was just moved in the female prison of Chowchilla, Central California Women's Facility, to be cured, and where she died in prison. In 2009, Susan Atkins had been the prisoner who served the longest the female prisoner who served the longest sentence in prison in California. But when she died, now is Patricia Krenwinkel, who is still in prison, and she is still serving the sentence in the prison of Chino, California. And now she is the female prisoner with more years spent in a female jail in California. Tex Watson converted himself to Christian religion in 1975 and now is a devoted Christian, and he also serving his sentence in the prison of Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility in San Diego, California. Linda Kasabian, who had repented and attempted to stop not also the massacre at Cielo Drive, but then I will reveal you also at least other 2 massacres by the Manson family, got the immunity in exchange to witness against these people. So she got the immunity. I got to know that Linda Kasabian died on January 2023. Incredible, and then we immediately go to the disturbing, horrifying original videos and photos. The owner of the house at Cielo Drive, the producer Rudy Altobelli, came back to live in the huge house at Cielo Drive only after 3 weeks from the massacre, and denounced Sharon Tate's family for damages at his property, and he wanted $15,000 due to the blood of the victims in his house. This wasn't a human being. Oh my gosh.
One investigator is reminiscent of a weird religious rite. 5 persons, including actress Sharon Tate, were found dead at the home of Miss Tate and her husband, screen director Roman Polanski.
This house that was cordoned off by the police, it was on Cielo Drive, and we didn't know who lived there. It wasn't until a few hours later that the police announced the victims.
Miss Tate, who starred in Valley of the Dolls, was 8 months pregnant and was found in a bikini-type nightgown with a rope around her neck attached to the body of a man. Among the other victims were Hollywood hairstylist Jay Sebring and coffee heiress Abigail Folger. One officer summed up the murders when he said, "In all my years, I have never seen anything like this before."
The crime scene was horrendous, and the stab wounds were just unbelievable.
Well, at the scene we had one body in a vehicle near the gate, a man and a woman in the main room, and a man and a woman on the lawn in front of the house, all deceased.
On the front door was insurance blood, the word PIG.
The town was in terror, absolute terror, particularly the entertainment industry, because it looked like they were attacking the entertainment industry.
Bob Evans said he...
So now I'm going to show you, I started softly because then I will show you the corpses of all the victims in Claire, Uncensored. Here I am.
The victims, helter-skelter, piggies, stuff like that, on the doors and on the walls.
Everybody thought that it was a copycat. It was very similar. There were blood scrawlings on the walls, and police had nothing. They had no clues to who had done this.
With all due respect, I think they were a Keystone Cops operation. Because there was a feud between the LAPD and the LA sheriffs, they never spoke to each other. And the only way the cops solved the case was because Blabbermouth Susan Atkins, who was a member of the Manson family, boasted to her cellmates, "Hey, you know who killed Sharon Tate? I did." And then repeated it to the grand jury. And once the grand jury heard it, they indicted Manson and the rest of the gang.
Charlie had come with quite a bit of publicity before he even got to LA. If you remember
Now I'm going also to show you this.
Manson and the rest of the gang.
Charlie Charlie had come with quite a bit of publicity before he even got to L.A. If you remember a Life magazine portrait of him with the crazy hair and the eyes, and we thought this was Svengali who was coming. And in walks this little guy, like 5'3".
The girls were Leslie Van Houten, Susan Atkins, and Patricia Krenwinkel. Charles Tex Watson, who was also a key figure in the murders.
You know, the jail is not a very nice place to be. And you have all kinds of different people on all kinds of different levels, and I have to deal with all those levels. I have to deal with every kind of psychotic maniac you got in the world trying to burn me up, trying to beat me up, trying to get some attention to get me in any kind of direction they can.
Charles Manson was a convict. He spent most of his life in prison. And I visited him almost 200 times in prison, spoke to him on the phone hundreds of times.
I really wasn't up on the 60s as much as you all make me out to be. I had just got out of prison. People came around me because I played a lot of music, and I was fairly free and open because I really didn't know, honestly. Everyone says that I was the leader of those people, but I was actually a follower of the children because, like, I never grew up. I've been in jail most of this time, so I stayed in the minds of the children.
He has a different mind given his background and how he was raised, but there's nothing unsound about it.
George Stimson is either the husband or the common law husband of Sandra Good, who was one of Manson's first followers in 1967.
Of course, Charles Manson had a very terrible, he never had a real childhood and adolescence. Society didn't help him. But now, look at this. Spawn Ranch.
The remoteness to really separate his followers from not just their families and friends, but kind of reality in the real world.
I set those people's minds back on the track with Jesus on a rebirth movement.
Everybody at the ranch believed Manson was Jesus Christ. And then he used a lot of LSD and other drugs, but mostly LSD, in his manipulation and mind control of these people. And he would physically put double doses of LSD on their tongues when they'd have their nightly meetings. And he wouldn't do LSD when he was manipulating the group.
Well, you see, I live in the underworld. You live in the overworld. I do a lot of things underworld that you guys don't see. I made about 75 albums in Vacaville. And I bootlegged about 3 times more music than the Beatles put out.
This was Terry Melcher, who refused to produce Manson, and so they hypothesized that Cielo Drive Massacre was due to this fact. But as I told you before, Charles Manson already knew that in that house he didn't live anymore, so I rule out this hypothesis about Cielo Drive Massacre at that address. Now I go on with incredible original official videos. Okay, I go.
Come to her home that fateful night.
And now, here we are with Patricia Krenwinkel.
Patricia Krenwinkel was a sort of an ugly duckling of a girl. She never thought she was that attractive. Charlie immediately took her in hand, flattered her. He also made love to her and said what a beautiful woman she was. She was smitten. Nobody had ever said that before.
When I met Mr. Manson, basically I fell in love with a man. I met him, and it was he and I thought I was falling in love with a man. Eventually he started defining himself as a god.
On Friday, August the 8th,
this was the man who persecuted Charles Manson.
Now was the time for murder and bloodshed to begin.
The Tate lot.
Into the living room portion of the residence where the victim, Sebring, attempted to escape and was shot by crime partner Watson. Thereafter, the other victims were attacked and killed. One victim told her ran out of the back door and she was pursued by you. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true.
So what happened when you caught up to her?
I stabbed her.
In the back?
Yes.
How many times did you stab her?
I have no idea.
Or more than one time?
Yes.
And was she talking to you or groaning or what was she doing?
She's saying stop.
Adkins was inside having Sharon Tate at knife point, and Adkins looked her in the eye and, pardon my language, but said, "Look, I don't care about you. I don't care about your baby. You're gonna die and you better be ready for it, and I don't feel a thing about it." And then Adkins started stabbing her.
Mr. Manson, did you go to the residence after the murders?
No. And let me explain that to the board. The reason they want to say that is because they should have let me out of here 3 years ago, because if I'm not on any scene of the crime, you can only keep me 18 years and you've already had me 23, so I can sue you for Hearst Castle probably.
Okay.
I do believe that the people who inflicted the wounds are responsible for inflicting the wounds, but I don't know to this day whether Charlie ordered the murders at the Tate house.
How do you feel now about what you know?
It's grotesque. It's absolutely horrible. It's very difficult for me to live with the fact that I could do anything so horrible and so horrendous. I feel terrible about it, but I cannot change it. No matter what I do, I cannot change 1 minute of my life. And as I've said before, I don't expect the board to say that I can go home. I am paying for this as best as I can. There is nothing more I can do outside of being dead to pay for this. And I know that's what you
This was Patricia Tate.
I cannot take my own life.
Miss Crandall, why don't you take a second to compose yourself?
This was Patricia Tate, known as Patty. She was Sharon Tate's sister, and she was a beautiful actress too. Unfortunately, she died in 2000 at only 42 from breast cancer. So really two unlucky sisters. Listen to her.
Crimes are bad enough that yes, they should stay in prison for the rest of their lives. Like my sister will stay in her grave for the rest of time, and her baby, and Abigail Folger. I'm sorry.
Having a family member at the parole hearing is so vital. Patty came and she just gave a very emotional speech from the heart about what it was like to be Sharon Tate's sister and what it had done to the family. And it just demolished the family even to this day.
I don't want any chances. I don't trust her. I don't trust any of these people. I don't want them out.
Ms. Cranford, the panel has reviewed all the information received from the public and relied on the following circumstances and concluded that you're not suitable for parole. And would pose an unreasonable risk of danger to society and a threat to public safety if released from prison.
Charles Manson is still nowadays, in 2024, considered one of the fiercest serial killer in the history ever, and also a satanic icon. But have you heard Charles Manson himself? I taught about Jesus Christ, and he repeated until his death that he never killed a person in all of his life. Is it possible? Because I mean, a serial killer. When you think about a serial killer, you think about someone like the Jack the Ripper, and not a man who has never murdered anyone. Is it possible? I go on.
Almost 23 years that he has been in prison for these murders. In my estimation, Mr. Manson has learned nothing. He has no respect for authority, he has no respect for society or desire to be part of it, and he has no remorse for directing the murder of any of these 9 victims. I would respectfully ask the board to find Mr. Manson unsuitable for parole and to give him the maximum 5-year denial.
You say in your minds that I'm guilty of everything that you've got on paper. So therefore, it would run logic that I would need to have remorse for what you think is reality. They built whole penitentiaries in the fear that they generated off of this case so the public can feel safe against this monster, and it's okay if I have to spend my life in prison. You've medicated me, you've burnt me, you've beat me, you've stabbed me, you've done everything you can do to me, and I'm still here, and you're still going to have to face the truth about this case sooner or later, if not here in the street. You've lost 6 generations of children to me because you won't pay me what you owe me. Because I didn't break no law. I didn't kill nobody. I didn't tell nobody to get killed.
As soon as you get there, you're going to have 15,000 people who are covering up what they've already been stealing and doing.
What do you say to one of the most infamous mass murderers of all time when given the chance? We ask for his story in his own.
So, and now, because Charles Manson, until his death, he always stated to be the scapegoat of a conspiracy. And now I'm going to show you also his handwriting, and then we start with the horrifying original videos and photos of the crime scene, all the dead victims in Claire, and Uncensored. Now I go.
Shock the public.
In a scene described by investigators as reminiscent of a weird religious ritual, 5 persons, including actress Sharon Tate, were found dead. Among the other victims were Hollywood hairstylist Jay Sebring. One officer summed up the murders when he said, "In all my years, I have never seen anything like this before."
I was in the kitchen and the phone rang.
So I've just shown you the images that were censored, but now I'm going to show you, so be prepared, because I'm going to show you the real photos, Sharon Tate included, completely in Claire. So I warn you, since now many images could disturb the sensitivity of the viewers.
That stupid fucking district attorney convicted me for a fucking helter-skelter thing that he was taking. And it took me 40 years to figure out what a call was.
When speaking to Charles Manson, the topic of helter-skelter comes up frequently, and Manson's answer is always the same. He maintains that helter-skelter was invented by the prosecution. The Manson family's convictions were led by Vincent Bugliosi, who wrote the book Helter-Skelter, which became the best-selling true crime book of all time.
Crime scene photo, the blood you're watching is true. be prepared. We start with the first corpses.
Nothing could have been more horrendous than what happened that night.
This was because you must know that few people told you that when Jay Sebring was hanged with those horrifying rope by the neck together with, he was wearing also a kind of cap covering his head. So when they took this cap away, this was Jay Sebring on the ground with the rope at his neck, and you can see also that he had been beaten very strong. He had probably the nose broken, and I go on.
To innocent people who didn't even know
So,
they're murderers.
I make you see the other victim, because then I start to something even worse.
To innocent people who
I immediately
didn't even know they're murderers.
I arrive immediately. Okay.
Nothing could have been more horrendous than what happened that night. To innocent people who...
Then I will show you. This was Abigail Folger, brutally slaughtered. She succeeded in escaping from Patricia, but then she was reached by Patricia and she had been stabbed so many times that the police was right, because her nightgown looked red instead than white and light blue. So these were the first scenes.
Helter-skelter nonsense that is so far away from the truth. I will never, to get a parole, say that what Bugliosi said was true. Never. I'd rather die in prison than get out on a lie. Part of it was the times and the desperation that had set in 1969.
So, Charles Manson, these are photos of Charles Manson when he was very young. Charles Manson stated that this Bugliosi, he himself invented the story of Helter Skelter, and he stated, "I prefer to die in prison than to get out with a lie." So, I prefer to die in prison in the truth than to get out with a lie. And so it happened in this life. I think that these are really things to go deep in this situation. I think this was one of Charles Manson's best friends. Listen what he says.
Has known Manson personally for 25 years and has quite possibly spent more time face to face with him than anyone else.
If there is a Charlie Manson was probably created the first time he went into those boys' homes. That kid went through some hell in there. And some of the things that he told me, he would never admit to being raped by men or anything like that. That's just one thing he just don't do. He just don't. That puts you in a whole different mindset. It's about life or death where he's at. life or death.
I've only been outside a couple years. Well, I got this case here. You figure that if you go locked up in reform school when you're 9 years old and you don't get out until you're 20, in your brain you're still 9 years old on the outside. Can you see that?
He doesn't trust nobody. He doesn't even trust me. Up until this day, as long as I can tell you that I've known him and interacted with him as a pen pal, visited him in jail, talked to him on the telephone for some 25 years now, he don't trust me as far as he can spit.
Anyone that helps me is helping themselves. And I don't get much help because there ain't nobody there. So it's like everybody that's using me, they're not helping me. They're just riding on me.
Police records reflect that by the time Charles Manson was 24 years old,
So, you understand that he had a very difficult life. And now, listen to what Grey Wolf says. Immediately.
Charles Manson in person insists that his view of the world is defined by his life in prison.
Prison is the mind. The mind is prison. That's why they haven't been able to break me, because there's no such thing. They're in a fantasy. They don't have a reality.
I've met him, and I've talked to him a lot. When I've looked in his eyes, he said himself that if he was guilty of anything, he wouldn't have made it through this long. You can feel people. You know, truth tellers, you feel them right away, and you want to be around them. He's not lying about nothing.
Most of the people in here are just your reflections. They're your mistakes. So as a collective society.
Leading up to the summer of 1967, Charles Manson was in Los Angeles serving time for check forgery in a federal prison called Terminal Island, including the actual killer, Tex Watson. How did Tex Watson come to be with Manson and perhaps fall under his control? Brian Davis recounts that in 1967, Watson left northern Texas to live with a friend in Los Angeles, finding a part-time job at a Hollywood wig shop.
I talked with the guy that worked with Tex. He said Tex was an all-American boy. After about a year, Tex started to hang out at parties and smoke marijuana, start to experiment with drugs and grew his hair out a little bit. And at that point, he said Tex started to turn. So all this was going on, leading up before Tex ever met Charlie.
Tex Watson met Charles Manson when he was invited to attend a never-ending party that was being held at a Pacific Palisades mansion. The house was owned by the drummer of the Beach Boys, Dennis Wilson.
Charlie crosses over into that through the girls. Pat and Ella Jo Bailey were out hitchhiking, and Dennis Wilson picked them up.
The Beach Boys' 15th studio album, 2020, features a song co-written by Charles Manson called Never Learn Not to Love. During that time, Manson befriended a record producer through Dennis Wilson named Terry Melcher.
Was Tex Watson one of the most ferocious killers in the Manson's family?
Try to convince them that they should. He just manipulated them to try to make them so complicit in violent crimes that they would not snitch on.
This was, and then before I made you watch the face of J.C. Bring when the police took this bag on his face away. This was one of the first real crime scene. This was J. Sebring dead. As you may watch.
We're all in one family.
and we were helping the brother. Happened to be Beausoleil.
He told other people he was trying to send a message to me into the jail so that I wouldn't snitch on him, to make the police think they're the wrong person.
According to Bobby Beausoleil, this is not the entire picture, but reaffirms Manson's deeper motive. Committing a copycat murder at Cielo Drive to free Beausoleil would make others complicit and prevent them from talking to the police about the Bernard Crowe murder.
Depending on the orientation of whoever he was.
I'm not so convinced about this theory. To do a copycat murder, so Bobby could be out from prison. But why that horrifying massacre and to slaughter Sharon Tate was 8.5 months pregnant? I'm not sure about it. And now it's the time that you will see all the victims dead uncensored, included Sharon Tate. Now it's the time. I warn you, so I can go.
I remember when we first went in.
Susan Atkins.
Said, "Who are you?" And Tex said, "I'm the devil, and I'm here to do the devil's business." What I saw happening in Tex, it was just like seeing somebody go crazy. I don't think Charles Manson's.
I want to remind you that Susan Atkins had a personal motive to kill Sharon Tate, because I want to remind you that when Roman Polanski decided to shoot the movie Dance of Vampires, you must know that that Susan Atkins was so pretty because she was an actress too. Of course, not famous as Sharon Tate and not beautiful as Sharon Tate, but she was a pretty actress who also played in many horror cartoons, also by Anton LaVey, because do you remind, she was a closer friend, an intimate friend of Anton LaVey. And when she got to know that Roman Polanski wanted to shoot the movie The Dance of Vampires, she went to the casting. And also Sharon Tate went to the casting. They both went, and Roman Polanski had to decide who had to play the main vampire, the main character with the red wig in the movie. In the beginning, Roman Polanski didn't get very impressed by the wonderful Sharon Tate, but he was going to choose just Susan Atkins. But then the staff around Roman Polanski suggested him Sharon Tate because she was one of the most wonderful women ever, and she was also very well to play. So even if Roman Polanski was very perplexed, he accepted the suggestion of the staff, so he refused Susan Atkins and he chose Sharon Tate. So Susan Atkins was out of the movie. So when she got to know that Sharon Tate would have played the main character in Dance of Vampires, and that she had got engaged with Roman Polanski, and then she married Roman Polanski, she deeply hated Sharon Tate. So she had a personal motive. This is the reason why her murder was so ferox. She was pitiless, she was pure evil, and she was merciless against Sharon Tate and the baby she had in her womb, because she deeply hated Sharon Tate. So about Susan Atkins, she had a personal motive. And I go on.
Mind was in control of Tex's mind that night. Charlie's human too, you know. And
that was a movie.
Mental powers are just as limited, maybe not as limited as other humans, but there was an evil force in control of Tex that night.
And now it's the moment that many of you were waiting for, all the documentary. I start and you will see all the horrifying videos and official photo of this horrifying massacre. I start. Let's start with the first victim.
So horribly. I don't know.
This was that guy who was only 18. Parent went there to sell an alarm clock radio at the caretaker of the property. As you may see, is completely drenched in blood. As you may see, the corpse, Tex Watson, murdered, merciless and with an incredible fury, this so young guy who was only 18. And look at him. Look at him. He was stabbed many times and also shot to death 4 times. I go on.
People really think about how.
And this is the more needed photos of, this was Abigail Folger, completely massacred by all the stabs by Patricia Krenwinkel, and not only. As you may see, crime scene photo, Abigail Folger. Police was completely right. Her nightgown looked like a red nightgown. Instead, this was all the blood, because her nightgown was white and also pale blue light. Look at her. You can see her face. And then she was stabbed every way in her body. When she screamed to Patricia, "Please stop, I'm already dead." And instead, Patricia, merciless, kept on stabbing her so many times that she wasn't even able to count them because there were countless stabs. In her, you can see in her hands, in her arms, and then the body was completely massacred and slaughtered. This was Abigail Folger, dead, slaughtered in the garden of the property in Cielo Drive. I go on.
You know, just how much they...
This is another image of J.C. Bring in the living room, and here when the police arrived you can see that the ropes were already cut. So J.C. Bring had still this bag on his face and he was wearing a pyjama and he was drenched in blood. But now the worst.
Suffered. I mean, I think about Sharon Tate and I think she must have been...
Here we are. This was Sharon Tate, completely slaughtered. She had been stabbed 16 times by Susan Atkins and Tex Watson, but then Susan Atkins disemboweled her, and she took her fetus out of her womb and she threw it in the living room. Now you must watch if you are able. This was Susan Atkins. As you may see, she had been tied with the same rope, and near her J.C. Bring. They were tied at the same rope by the neck, then cut in the end. And this was Sharon Tate with still open mouth, and she was, and with, as you may see, with an arm, she tried still to save her baby, but she had been already disemboweled, and she was already slaughtered, and no more her baby in her womb. These are the creepiest images I could show you. She was completely in a pool of blood, and then there are other photos I'm going to show you. I can tell you that I show you these photos because you must know what, because in this world there is good and evil, and this was one of the most horrifying massacre of the history, and also shocking and merciless. I go on.
Insane with fear by the time
this was devilish.
What does it take to have somebody tell you to go and kill people? For what reason? I mean, I couldn't.
This was J.C. Brin without the bag, and this was the other photo. This is Sharon Tate, completely drenched in blood, And the detective I made you watch in the previous part of this documentary, when I talk you about Untold, the Church of Satan, and Cielo Drive Massacre. He was right. Sharon Tate was very, very beautiful, even in death. Because if you don't know anything, she was drenched in blood, like Carrie White in Carrie movie by Brian De Palma, played by the incredible actress. So, by the incredible actress Sissy Spacek, and you can see that it's a movie. No, it's not a movie. It's an official crime scene photo delivered by the police. Police released these photos. As you may watch, Sharon Tate's face was completely bloody, but still very wonderful. There was still her white teeth, that horrifying rope around her neck, and she had her bra still on her body, and she was keeping her stomach, because she attempted to protect her son until the end.
Well, they would butcher people, and these are the people that I've been sleeping with.
When Susan Atkins used Sharon Tate's blood to write on the wall, it appears to call back to the previous murder, though the police never made this connection.
Sheriff's Homicide was handling the Hinman murders,
and
two of the homicides.
that was instead a scene of a movie, because the real writing pig, I have shown you the real written pig with the blood of Sharon Tate at the beginning of this documentary. I'm really completely shocked too, and now it's the time to go on. Listen.
Investigators went to the Tate investigators and said, look, we have this murder of Gary Hinman, and there's writing in blood.
Charles Manson always admitted his involvement in Hinman murder. Even if he didn't murder Hinman, he just cut one ear off. But he always repeated he never ordered such a horrifying thing. And now, go. You will be always shocked.
Her. And he probably would have gotten away with it a little bit longer.
Susan Atkins.
While inside the county jail, Susan Atkins told her cellmates she and the group were involved in the murder of Sharon Tate. One of the first people she confessed to was a call girl named Virginia Graham.
Susan Atkins, she plopped herself down and she sat on the bunk and we started talking. And she presumed to tell me how stupid the police were and they were dumb. She said to me, you know those murders up Benedict Canyon? She says, you know who did it, don't you? And I said, no. And she said, cold as can be, you're looking at her. She didn't say helter-skelter to me. That I found out helter-skelter later on, but I don't recall her telling me helter-skelter.
Susan Atkins was denied compassionate release in 2008 and died from brain cancer in prison. But in 1969, the DA was willing to overlook the brutality of her actions.
The deal with Susan Atkins, the prosecution was going to let her plead to second-degree murder. Sharon was begging for her life. She was being held by Susan Atkins, and she said, "Please don't kill me, please don't kill me, I just want to have my baby."
I felt nothing. I felt absolutely nothing for her. And she begged for her life and for the life of the baby.
She said, "Look, bitch,
I don't care about you or your child. You're gonna die tonight. I don't feel a thing behind it."
You know, having Susan Atkins as the witness, that wouldn't have gone over too well with the jury.
The prosecutor who was working out the deal was the author of Helter Skelter, Vincent Bugliosi.
Vincent Bugliosi was an outstanding prosecutor. But if one really were to dig much deeper, what emerges is he was a womanizer. He loved...
As Susan Atkins, the cellmate of Susan Atkins, stated that Susan Atkins never talked to her about Helter Skelter, because according to Charles Manson, was this Bugliosi to have invented the story of Helter Skelter? Was it true or not? Because it will be very, very important, because I explain you the reason why it's so important.
Defendant must not only agree to commit a crime, but also commit an overt act in furtherance of that agreement.
Without proving the helter-skelter motive, there was no evidence whatsoever that Manson wanted these murders to happen. You have to be a party to it. You can't just know about it.
I didn't break the law because I've been in prison all my life and I know the law. I know what conspiracy is. I'm not going to conspire to do something. That's kind of stupid, isn't it? I'm not as a stupid dude. I'm dumb, but I'm not stupid.
This is the implication of what Manson was saying. It's not that he wasn't involved
they say there wasn't a concrete proof that Charles Manson was involved in Cielo Drive Massacre, and according to Charles Manson, there was a kind of conspiracy to do this.
Manson admitted to shooting Bernard Crowe, his involvement with drugs, the Straight Satans, and the motive of getting Bobby out of prison. But when it comes to the murders, he purposely kept himself at a distance.
I thought it was a horrible case against him. Remember that he was not at the scene. He was 40 miles away when the murders took place. So he was an armchair murderer.
The helter-skelter theory was how the prosecution demonstrated that Manson was guilty of conspiracy and murder.
So, if there wasn't this theory of Helter Skelter, maybe he could have gone out of prison at some point. It's not something because until the end of his life, he swore, "I never ordered the Cielo Drive Massacre or to kill Sharon Tate. She was a wonderful creature." So, what happened, really? Really? No, because in fact one investigator stated that the trial was more a circus, a media circus. And now, Listen to this.
Said, hey, we got to start a race war. Bernard Crow, drug dealing, car theft, auto, none of that has anything to do with this. If Vince introduces anything outside of that, it starts to wash away that helter-skelter theory. Then you have that reasonable doubt creeping in. Well, maybe it has something to do with the drug deal. And Vince doesn't want you going down that road.
People don't want to look at it from the point of view that brings them to something they don't like.
The prosecution used the race war as a basis of their legal argument. If the alternative theory is correct, might they have ignored the true nature of the events to gain a conviction? Whatever Manson's crimes do.
So this was interesting. I go on.
The ends justify the means.
I think if he had had a competent lawyer, he would have either walked at the trial or walked on appeal, because there just wasn't sufficient testimony to convict him of anything.
To convict Manson, the prosecution's entire case depended on one of the murderers corroborating their theory. On December 2nd, 1969, 4 months after the death of Sharon Tate, the last of the murderers was captured. Linda Kasabian surrendered in New Mexico and returned to California. She immediately met with her attorney, Gary Fleischman.
I talked to her, and the only conversation I can tell you is I said, keep your mouth shut, and keep it shut in that jail. Don't talk to anybody about this, ever. I can't tell you the conversation I had with her, but I was led to believe that the murders up there started long before the Tate LaBianca case. I can't describe what she told me, but it was scary. The whole thing was scary.
At that time, Linda Kasabian had few options because Susan Atkins had already turned state's witness. According to Gary Fleischman, he had Kasabian sabotage Susan Atkins' testimony while they were both in custody to bolster her bargaining position with the prosecutors.
I had Linda pass kites to her in the jail. A kite is a little letter saying, in Charlie talk being, the DA is your lawyer, Charlie is the DA, nonsense like that. And this Atkins was a little nuts, and she then refused to testify. So now they were left with Linda. Period. And then negotiations started. First they offered me murder in the second degree. I said no. Then they offered me voluntary manslaughter. I said no. She was technically guilty of first-degree murder as an accessory before and after the fact.
Linda Kasabian was one of the 4 who had participated in the Sharon Tate murders and was with Charles Manson the night of the LaBianca murders. But prior to that, she had only been with the group for about 30 days and had spent little time with Manson himself.
Nobody ratted on me, except she didn't rat because she didn't know anything. What they did was they got some of the women that didn't know me. I can get in your mind.
So we typed up an immunity agreement. And the immunity agreement said Linda Kasabian will receive immunity if she testifies to the truth in the so-called Manson murders. The truth is as follows. I knew exactly what
you
was
can
necessary
see always this was the diary of Charles Manson and his handwriting.
That was Vince's business. I said, Linda, if you testify to that, you're going to walk out of that courtroom.
Charles Manson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, Charles Tex Watson, and Leslie Van Houten were all charged with murder and conspiracy. But Tex Watson had fled to his home state of Texas and faced extradition to California. With Linda Kasabian ready to testify, Tex Watson was not brought back in time for Manson's trial.
Tex sat out a whole year and watched that trial develop. And had he brought Tex in with him, there's no way he would have got that conviction.
They wanted to get rid of me.
I had gone to Stanford. I was really the only lawyer in the place that knew what the hell was going on. We filed a very detailed motion to get the case out of LA County. It had like 100 newspaper clippings. And I claimed that the bad publicity was instigated by the prosecutors. And that's enough to get the case dismissed, at least on appeal. That case should have never been tried in Los Angeles County. But when we went to make a deal, we withdrew the motion.
You should have seen my face when I was sitting in the courtroom and Linda came up with a demure, this little gold cross that she was fingering and got up on the stand and said, I'm just an angel sent here from heaven to tell the world that Charlie's the devil, not Jesus Christ.
So, ego.
And learn. The courtroom shows our justice. The courtroom is the eye of the social consciousness. You've got to go along with the courtroom. Right or wrong hasn't got anything to do with it. I'm a mass murderer in the courtroom.
It literally branded Charles Manson the most...
So, these particulars are very important. This was Charles Manson aged, and listen what he said.
Believe that all this time has gone by, man.
Charles Manson was not an innocent man, but does it matter how we know that? Should those in power be allowed to construct their own truth in the pursuit of justice?
I see things as they really are and true. You've got a constitution in the United States, and they read it and they study it in school, but they never really understand the validity of it and how powerful it really is.
I don't care who it is. If somebody doesn't get a fair trial, then we're all in trouble.
Do I think he suffered an injustice? Not really. Not in my heart of hearts. But as a matter of litigation, yes, he did suffer an injustice. Whether morally he suffered an injustice, I don't think so.
This leaves some to ask if the prosecution had pursued the alternative theory with its brutal but less sensational.
So, it's important this point because, okay, Charles Manson admitted all of his crimes, his robberies, the fact that he made women to prostitute, he was a pusher, robberies, all the worst crimes. But it doesn't mean that Charles Manson was a criminal. I wish I could know. Criminal, but did he ever kill somebody? And even if he was a killer, he denied until his last breath that he had nothing to do with Cielo Drive Massacre and the horrifying death of Sharon Tate. So, think about for a moment. Charles Manson was a criminal. Okay, he died on November the 19th, 2017 from a cancer. But if Charles Manson was guilty about everything, but think about if Charles Manson was innocent about Cielo Drive, who was the mastermind who ordered the massacre of Cielo Drive? Who really wanted to kill Sharon Tate? See you soon. Stay tuned.